Jaya Shriman Narayana. Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Jaya Shri Guru. Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Namaste, everyone. It is absolutely wonderful being with you again this week for our weekly live satsanga. As people know, this is something that we do every Monday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time because we are in the Midwest of America. This is where our temple is of the International Sanatana Society. And every week we do this. We get together and we have an online satsanga for those individuals who have been inspired by our videos, by our books, by everything that we do, but who cannot be here in Omaha. For those of you who are throughout the world, and we do indeed have people everywhere, in many dozens and dozens of nations throughout the world. I welcome you all. What we're going to be doing today is something actually quite special. And that is, we're going to be speaking about a collection of verses from the Narayana Upanishad. And what these verses talk about very specifically is a very specific mantra. And this is the primary mantra of the International Sanatana Dharma Society. It is a mantra, the mantra, that I personally have been meditating upon since the age of 14. It is the mantra that I was first initiated in by my first guru, Sri Acharyaji Acharya in New York, again when I was approximately 14 or so. And this mantra is Aum Namo Narayanaya. This is the mantra that we will be talking about today, but again, we will be doing this by talking about and commenting upon several verses from the Narayana Upanishad. Before we do this, however, I want to do something somewhat interesting, and that is I want to tell a story. And this is a true story, and it's a story leading up to, indeed, what we will be talking about today. Again, this is a true story that occurred, roughly 1,000 years ago, 900 years ago, something like that. And it involves the greatest Vedic philosopher of all time, and bar none. And that is Sri Ramanuja Acharya. And this is indeed a true story. This is a story that is contained in all of his earliest biographies, etc. And it's a somewhat involved story, so I'm going to just give a very brief summary of this story. And this is the story. When Ramanuja himself was a student, interestingly, like myself, like several individuals who actually practice Vedic spirituality, he had several gurus. He had quite a few people, actually, who he learned from. Indeed, his primary guru, Yamuna Acharya, interestingly, he never even met. A lot of people are not aware of that. People know that Yamuna is the guru officially of Ramanuja, but Yamuna actually passed away before Ramanuja ever met him. Ramanuja was on his way to meet his guru, but he passed away due to old age. So in the meantime, Ramanuja had several other gurus who taught him different things, Vedanta, Bhakti, etc. Well, one of these gurus was an individual who initiated him in the Narayana mantra. And this individual revealed this mantra to Ramanuja. Now, when he taught him this mantra, he told Ramanuja something very, very special, and that was this. He said, I am going to reveal this mantra unto you, but this is not an ordinary mantra. This is a mantra that is not meant for the masses. It is a mantra which, if an individual meditates upon this mantra, they will have liberation. They will have freedom from suffering. They will know God. So with that, of course, Ramanuja was extremely happy because all of his life, this is what he wanted. He was devoted to Narayana. So indeed, his guru gave him this mantra. Now, the thing is, his guru also explained to him, upon revealing this mantra to you, you must take a vow to me that you will not reveal this mantra to anyone else, because it is indeed a secret mantra. This mantra is so powerful, so important, so sacred, that you cannot reveal it to anyone else. So Ramanuja, being a very dutiful disciple, of course agreed, and he said, yes, Guruji, I will not reveal this mantra to anyone. So he thanks his guru, he offers his obeisances at the feet of his guru, and he departs, and he begins to make his way toward Srirangam, very sacred city in South India. And as he's walking, he begins to think about this, and he begins to think, this is truly amazing. I am so blessed that my guru gave me this mantra. And what did he say again? Anyone who recites this mantra, anyone who meditates upon this mantra with devotion, that person will have liberation. And as Ramanuja continued to walk and walk, he began to think about the implications of this and what his guru said. But wait, there are so many people in this world who are suffering tremendously. And now I have in my possession a mantra that will relieve that suffering. And yet my guru told me that I cannot reveal this, and I took a vow. I cannot go against what my guru has asked me. And as he's thinking in this way, he finally makes a decision. And that decision is that he's going to reveal the mantra, as I'm sure some people in the audience could have guessed. Well, as he makes his way to Srirangam, he begins to call people, just normal, ordinary people. And he begins to tell them, come with me, I have something I need to tell you. I have a great secret that I'm going to reveal to you. And hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people come, and he begins to recite the mantra out loud to everyone. And he tells them, if you meditate upon this mantra, you will have liberation. You will know God. Your suffering will come to an end. And all these people are reciting the mantra now. Well, to make a long story short, word gets back to his guru as far as what he did. And Ramanuja is summoned to his guru, and he appears before his guru. And his guru, as is understandable, is very upset about this. Because again, he told Ramanuja, please do not reveal this to anyone. And here's Ramanuja doing the opposite, revealing it to the whole world. And he begins to chastise Ramanuja and say, oh, what have you done? You took a vow not to reveal this mantra, and I gave this to you in confidence. And, oh, do you understand the implications of what you have done? To go against an order, to go against a vow that you took in the presence of your guru is something that is truly terrible. It's a terrible thing to do. This is not something that a person wants to do, because the karmic implications of this will be terrible. And in the meantime, Ramanuja is sitting there very humbly, just listening. And finally, the guru is finished, and Ramanuja says, in effect, to his guru, Guruji, I understand, and I beg for your forgiveness. Please accept my humble apologies for this. The reason why I did this was because you explained to me that anyone who recites this mantra will achieve liberation and their suffering will come to an end. And when you said this to me, I realized, how could I not share this with the entire world, even if it meant my own spiritual destruction, even if it meant that I was going against the order of my guru, even if it meant that I had to go to hell. So I apologize for having done this, but this is the reason why. Upon hearing this, the guru's heart melted, and he said to Ramanuja, actually, Ramanuja, what you did was right, and you have my blessings. That is the story, and it's a pretty well-known story. Again, it's a true story. This actually did occur with this very great philosopher when he was a younger student. And that mantra that was indeed revealed by the Guru to Ramanuja, and which Ramanuja in turn revealed to the world, was this mantra that is found all throughout the Vedic scriptures. It's found in the Upanishads, it's found in the Puranas, it's found in many, many different places. And that mantra is Aum Namo Narayanaya. And this is the mantra that we will be discussing today. So that was all by way of introduction. So again, we're going to be looking at the Narayana Upanishad. And I'm not going to give you verse numbers because truthfully the Narayana Upanishad is very short, and the section I'm reading you is based on Upanishad. So to find it, all you need to do is read the Narayana Upanishad and you'll see these verses that I'm going to read here. So this is how these verses go. One should utter Om first, then Namaha, then Nāṛāyaṇāya. Om is a single syllable. Namaha consists of 2 syllables. Nārāyaṇāya contains 5 syllables. This is the sentence known as the Ashtakshara of Narayana. Whoever studies this Ashtakshara of Narayana and recites it constantly attains full life and supremacy over men, enjoys the pleasures of royalty, and becomes the master of all souls. He attains moksha, liberation. Indeed, he attains moksha. The Samaveda teaches this. The yogi, having pronounced the name of him who is complete bliss, who is Brahma Purusa, and who is of the nature of pranava, Om, a combination of a, u, is released from the bondage of birth and mundane existence. He who practices the mantra Aum Namo Narayanaya reaches Vaikuntha, the abode of Vishnu. Thus is the Narayana Upanishad. This is what the Narayana Upanishad says. And indeed, these are some very, very powerful verses that are found here. Again, when we are speaking about this very specific mantra, Aum Namo Narayanaya, several things that I want to say about this. Again, this mantra is found all throughout the Vedic scriptures. So while at the time of Ramanuja's guru, it was indeed a semi-secret mantra, the mantra itself has existed for thousands of years before that incident where Ramanuja revealed it to everyone. Again, it's found in the Narayana Upanishad. Many people are not aware of this, including many individuals who were brought up in the ISKCON movement. This mantra is found in the Srimad Bhagavatam as well. It's found again in many of the Puranas. It's found throughout many of the Vedic scriptures. So again, this is not a minor mantra. This is indeed a very important Vedic mantra. And in fact, the very fact that it is revealed in Shruti, in the Upanishads, makes it especially an authoritative mantra. So all this being said, let's very quickly just look through this verse a little bit. It's a long combination of verses, so I'm not going to comment on everything, but I will just a little bit. Because, as always, I want to leave some room for questions and answers. First of all, the mantra itself is very simply explained, what the mantra is. These 3 words, Om Namo or Namaha, and then Narayanaya. This is the first thing that's explained. Thus, it's called the Ashta-akshara mantra. Very simply, Akshara means syllable, and Ashta means 8. So it is the mantra of 8 syllables. That's what that term means. This mantra, interestingly, is known by many other names as well. So, for example, it's known as the Tiru Mantra. Tiru is another way of saying Shri or auspicious. Thus, it's called the Tiru Mantra, or the auspicious mantra. So there are several different names for this. Now, this Vedic scripture, the Narayana Upanishad, indeed makes this very clear, the importance and the efficacy of this mantra. This mantra is a mantra that indeed will give an individual liberation. But more than this, it says several things, and I want to just very quickly go through this. So whoever studies this Ashtakshara mantra of Narayana and recites it constantly, so in other words, whoever meditates upon this mantra and whoever understands its full meaning, what happens with this person? Well, that person attains full life. That's the first thing. And what is meant by full life? Oh, just that, those two words alone, full life, I can probably talk about for an hour. What is meant by full life, of course, is this, that the common individual is not indeed living a full life. Rather, we're living a partial life. We're living a life within materiality. Not understanding that the rest of life consists of the spiritual. Thus, when an individual becomes a spiritual person, it is then and only then that they are living a full life. So this is the first thing that this mantra is saying, is that by indeed reciting this mantra, now you are living spiritual and thus full life. So that's the first thing. Now, interesting. This is an interesting additional clause. And supremacy over men. Now, this is a very interesting clause that for some individuals, not understanding what this means, it might make them a little bit nervous. Oh, what does this mean? Isn't this supposed to be a spiritual mantra? And yet it is being said that by reciting this mantra, we will have supremacy over men. Well, what does that mean? We're going to be a dictator over others? And of course, that's not what is meant here at all. By supremacy over men, what is meant is that, again, being an individual who is now living a full life, the spiritual person who recites this mantra and achieves the ultimate goal, the ultimate fruit of reciting this mantra, becomes an individual who is above all others. Why? Because they understand everything. Because they are not an illusion. Because while all other human beings, both men and women, are still living in accordance with the dictates of their passions, their desires, their illusion, that individual who has liberation is living in accordance with one thing and only one thing, and that is devotion to Sriman Narayana and wanting to serve God. So thus, that person indeed has supremacy over all men. And let's go on. This person enjoys the pleasures of royalty. Interesting. Why is this the case? Very esoteric explanation, but I'll try to explain this as succinctly as I can. Wherever there is Narayana, of necessity, there also is Sri Lakshmi. So this being the case, Sri Lakshmi is indeed the consort of Narayana, but more than this, she also is the goddess of prosperity. So thus, when an individual knows Vishnu, knows Narayana, you then also automatically have the blessings of Lakshmi Devi. Thus, you have all the accoutrements of royalty. This is why throughout history, and not just in, let's say, the Vedic tradition, but many traditions, individuals who from illusion are considered to be kings. They are considered to be royalty. Thus, Christ was a king. Thus, the Buddha was a Chakravartin. He was an emperor. And every sage in the Vedic tradition is called Maharaja. Maharaja. Thus, the sage becomes the perfect royalty, the perfect king. So thus, this is what is meant by this. And let's go on a little bit more. And that person becomes the master of all souls. And this goes along with supremacy over all men. Master of all souls, again, not meaning that he now suddenly becomes some tyrannical dictator, but master over all souls, meaning that now the spiritual influence that the liberated person has, having meditated upon and achieving the fruits of indeed this mantra, which consists of the names of God, now that being the case, no one is master over him. Rather, due to his effulgence, due to his influence, his spiritual influence, Now he is an individual who is a leader. The spiritual person, above all else, is the greatest of all leaders. That is what is meant by this. Very good. So let's go on a little bit more. Now, this is important, these next two sentences. But let me read them first, then I'll explain why they are important. He attains moksha. Indeed, he attains moksha. Now, why are these two sentences of such importance? Well, individuals who have been to my classes in the past, individuals who have seen the videos of my lectures, etc., you will remember that I've said many times that the Vedic scriptures are perfect and a certain way, and they have a certain process that they follow. And this is one of these processes. When the Vedic scriptures repeat something, it's not repeating something due to poetic reasons or because, well, the author just wasn't sure what else to say, so they were not very intelligent and they repeated themselves. See, if you've read the Vedic scriptures, you know that the very idea of the authors of the Vedic scriptures being unintelligent is itself hilarious and ludicrous. No. Why do they repeat something? For emphasis. For emphasis. When something is repeated in the Vedic scriptures, it is telling you, listen to this. Listen to this very carefully. And now, with that understanding, let me read this again. He attains moksha. Indeed, he attains moksha. Now, moksha, for those individuals who are not very conversant with Sanskrit and may not quite understand what is meant by that, moksha means liberation. So why is this being emphasized? Well, because this especially makes it very clear, very penetrating within the totality of these verses, that this is the efficacious effect of the Narayana mantra. That indeed, if you recite, if you meditate upon, if you chant the Narayana mantra, you will achieve liberation. Now, the thing is, not every mantra can say this, and this cannot be said about every mantra. Again, I have made this clear in the past, but I have to make this especially clear now. The Vedic scriptures has thousands of mantras. Spiritual, interestingly, or I should say not all of them are used for spiritual purposes. There are mantras that cure snake bite. I always have to use this as an example. I believe it's in the Yajurveda that they have mantras for curing snake bite. Well, if you meditate upon a mantra that is meant for curing snake bite, you're not going to achieve liberation. That's guaranteed. Again, mantras are not all the same. There are only a small number of mantras that deliver liberation upon the reciter of that mantra. And very specifically, those are the mantras that consist of the revealed names of God. And very specifically, that have this construct. Aum Namaha, and then a name, an authorized, recognized, revealed name of God. So these mantras very specifically deliver liberation upon a person. And this is indeed one of these mantras, this Aum Namo Narayanaya. So thus, the Narayana Upanishad, one of the 108 official Upanishads, makes this very clear. This mantra will give you, if you desire it, liberation, as Ramanuja himself understood. And thus that's why he revealed this mantra openly to everyone. Now let's go on a little bit. The Samaveda teaches this. Very specifically, that is indeed the case, that the Samaveda teaches this doctrine. The yogi, having pronounced the name of him who is complete bliss. And that's just a clause of the next sentence, but let's stop there for now. What a truly beautiful and accurate way of understanding the nature of God. See, it's so unfortunate that today, of course, we know that atheism, over the course of the last roughly 300 years since the Enlightenment era in Europe, which then totality of the world with its darkness, interestingly, even though it was called the Enlightenment era. We know that for all this time, atheism has become very, very, I don't want to say prevalent, because most people are not atheists. Atheism always is a minority viewpoint, but it's become quite powerful, let's say, in this world. much more powerful than its numbers actually indicate. So yes, it's become something that has become a very powerful doctrine in this world. And why is this the case? Well, sadly, when it comes to the Abrahamic religions, the concept of God is a very harsh one. And I'm not going to go very deeply into this because for this talk at least, I don't want to go into the negatives of Abrahamism. You just have to read my books or watch several of our other videos to understand that. But the Vedic vision, the Vedic conception of the Absolute, of God, is something that's very different. Sanatana Dharma. God is not a being who is to be feared. God is not a being who is meant to be merely obeyed blindly. But rather, what is the nature of God? The nature of God is every positive attribute taken to an infinite degree. But more than this, the nature of God is not merely those attributes that describe the powerful aspect of God. Is God powerful? Yes. Is God great? Yes. God is all of these things, but more. God is of the nature of bliss. God is of the nature of love. And this is how we focus on God very specifically. Thus, this is also what the Narayana Upanishad is saying. Let me read this again. The yogi, having pronounced the name of him who is complete bliss. So the name of him, meaning again, this mantra, the Aum Namo Narayanaya. So the yogi, having pronounced the name of him who is complete bliss, who is the Brahma Purusa. Very simply, that means, Purusha means being, Brahma means of Brahman, so that being who is God, very simply, and who is of the nature of pranava, or Om, a combination of A, U, is released from the bondage of birth and mundane existence. So this latter sentence is doing several things in comparison to what was said just previously. First, it's describing the nature of God a little bit, just a few of the attributes of God. But more, it's also reiterating that indeed, if one recites this mantra, this name of God, Aum Namo Narayanaya, then what is the resultant effect of this? That individual is released from the bondage of birth and mundane existence. So that person is released, in other words, from samsara, from the cycle of reincarnation, and thus again achieves liberation. And now finally, this last very powerful sentence of the Narayana Upanishad. He who practices the mantra Aum Namo Narayanaya reaches Vaikuntha, the abode of Vishnu. So very nice. Sentence especially says it all. It spells it out. One who recites this specific mantra, and again, it says the mantra in the Sanskrit. I've actually read this in the Sanskrit. Aum Namo Narayanaya. One who recites this mantra, and it's by implication, because of course in these verses, the individual who's being spoken about is the yogi. Earlier on, it talks about the yogi. So thus, one who, as a yogi, meditates upon this mantra, what happens to that person? That person certainly achieves liberation, but more than this, that person attains Vaikuntha. In other words, that person comes face to face with God himself, with Sriman Narayana. That individual enters into the spiritual realm to then be with God for all of eternity, serving God in love and devotion. Vaikuntha, the abode of Lord Vishnu. So thus, this is the nature of this mantra. This is the mantra that I have been reciting since roughly the age of 14. It's the mantra that I teach to people. Indeed, the first time I taught this mantra openly was, I believe, 1988. I shared it with a few people previous to that. But as far as formally teaching this mantra, 1988 was the first year that I began teaching this mantra to the world. And it is the primary mantra of the International Sanatana Dharma Society. Why is this the case? Well, for all the reasons I mentioned, because I was initiated in it, but also because we ourselves are indeed coming in the line of Ramanuja. So took this mantra from a secret state. Again, it was in the Upanishads, it was in the scriptures, anyone could have read it, but still, it was not a mantra that was given out very freely. Ramanuja was the person who made this mantra truly known to the entire world for the first time, and we are following in his footsteps. Thus, we also, in the International Sanatana Dharma Society, in keeping with the spirit of Ramanuja, we also reveal this mantra to the entire world, regardless of anything. As long as an individual is sincere, as long as an individual has the sukriti, has the spiritual merit necessary such that they can appreciate the mantra and appreciate the philosophy behind the mantra, then we offer this mantra to the entire world. And why? Because this mantra will give liberation and will relieve your suffering. So thus, this is why I always urge everyone that you yourself, in your meditation, if you do a different kind of meditation, or if you don't do any sort of meditation at all, this is what I would ask of you, is to use this mantra in your meditation. And this is how I'm going to end, is by once again simply explaining to everyone how we meditate upon this mantra. And indeed, this is the most simple form, but also the most authentic form of indeed yogic meditation. Very simply, you sit in a clean, comfortable area. You can sit on the ground, you can sit on a chair, however you're comfortable, but you want to have a very straight back. Again, as I do now, people have always commented that I have a yogic posture, which I do. You see, people may not be able to see this, but as I'm giving these talks, my back is never against the chair. You see, this is what it would look like if my back were against the chair. Rather, I sit yogically without support. This is what you do. You sit in such a way, but again, you be comfortable. And you begin to focus very simply on breath. You focus on your breath just for about a minute or two, and you do this in order to relax yourself as much as possible. Then, having relaxed the body, especially the shoulders, having stilled the mind as much as you can, then, very simply, you begin out loud to recite the mantra. Aum Namo Narayanaya, Aum Namo Narayanaya. And you do this for as long as you can. Truthfully, there is no limit to how long you can do this mantra. You can do it for 20 minutes, you can do it for 10 minutes, you can do it for half an hour, even an hour if you wish. But do it in a duration that's realistic for you. You know, so-called traditions, yogic traditions, where from the very start, they will insist that you sit and meditate for 2 hours a day, even though maybe you just began meditating a few days ago. Well, of course, it's not only that is difficult, but more, a person who is forced to just jump into meditation to that extreme a degree probably is not going to be meditating for long. They'll probably do it for a few days, few weeks, and then they'll stop. Rather, what I suggest is start slow. Start with 10-15 minutes of saying the mantra, and then increase from there. But then, having said the mantra out loud, focusing all of your awareness with devotion upon the vibration of the mantra, then the way that you end is, again, silence. And you focus on your breath a second time. And the reason why you focus on your breath a second time is to allow the reverberations of the sound of the names of God to enter deeply within you and to affect you. So if you are not doing meditation now, then this is what I would strongly suggest, is that you try this. So I hope this was informative for people, and that people now know why this is indeed the primary mantra that our tradition emphasizes. This is the mantra that I recite, that I have been meditating on since the age of 14. This is the primary mantra of the International Sanatana Dharma Society, primary mantra. We accept all the Vedic mantras, but again, this is our primary practice. And hopefully this was informative for people. With that, I am going to stop there with the lecture portion of this evening. And I want to signal to everyone that if you have any questions, now is the time to please feel free to ask your questions. And with that, I thank you for listening to my talk very much. And if you give me just a few moments to look at these questions. I see a question right here that I have to answer, actually, because it's something that, sadly, I'm probably the only person who actually knows the answer to this question anywhere. And that is this question by War Saga. Is there a form of Buddhism that is a sister path of Sanatana Dharma? Tadagata Garbha. That is the sister path in Buddhism of Sanatana Dharma. It's called Tathagata Garbha. It's a philosophical school that I've written about. What I've written about it is not extremely available to the public. It was published in a journal, in a philosophical journal some time ago. Right now, honestly, I can't even remember the name of it, but maybe I'll try to make that very long essay available to people. But there is indeed a school of Buddhism that is not known by many people, Tathagata Garbha, it's called. And this is a theistic school of Buddhism that emphasizes devotion, that emphasizes that there is indeed an Atman, which was the original teaching of the Buddha, the idea of anatta or anatman, the idea that there is no soul, was not taught by Gautama Buddha himself. It was not taught. If you look at the original Pali literature, you can see that, but also there is this school, and there have been others historically, but most of them are extinct now, sadly, because of time and corruption. But this is indeed a sister path of Sanatana Dharma within the Buddhist context. Very good. Here's a nice question, actually, and I would like to answer this. Marty asks, can I chant this mantra if I have been part of another group but do not like or agree with them or that guru anymore? Would this be seen as abandoning the path I was already on? I really want to try. Thank you for that very sincere question. And let me try to answer this, actually. And I only say try because I don't know what is the nature of the group or the guru who you're talking about. But let me just say this. If indeed you were part of, let's say, some sort of Vedic or semi-Vedic or neo-Vedic sort of organization or group and following a specific guru, and if you found that when you say you no longer agree with that guru, etc., if that is the case because you've seen that, for example, that guru is not actually following properly, or what that guru was teaching is not philosophically accurate, or even worse, that the guru somehow did something unethical or something like that, then by default, yes, you should not be following that anyway. And it's not a matter of, let's say, being offensive to that previous path, because you would be being offensive to nothing. It would be offensive having left that, let's say, other path behind. It would be, if anything, offensive to not indeed acknowledge that. No, there is no offense, actually, in reciting Aum Namo Narayanaya. This is the name of God. You see, it's not a matter of groups. It's not a matter of this path versus that path, this organization, that organization. It's a matter of Narayana Upanishad. It's a matter of, indeed, the Vedic scriptures. The Vedic scriptures themselves, including Srimad Bhagavatam, Narayana Upanishad, and again, many other individuals, many acharyas taught this mantra, including the 12 Alvars and many, many other people. This is the name of God. And how can reciting the name of God ever be considered to be offensive? So yes, this is something that I want to assure you, please do not worry about. Again, I very much appreciate your sincerity and your being careful and wanting to make sure that you're not committing offense. But there is no committing offense by reciting the name of God with devotion. On the contrary, that is the very foundation of all true spirituality. So I hope that answered that question somewhat. Here's another question. Should we practice mindfulness meditation too, or only mantra meditation? Very good question. And by mindfulness, I'm going to take your wording seriously. If you mean vipassana, which is a Theravada Buddhist practice, as opposed to mindfulness, the way New Age people use it. With so many of these terms, of course, as we know, New Age people don't even know what they're talking about. They just throw words all over the place and they don't understand what the words even mean, which is why they never achieve anything spiritually. But again, if by mindfulness you mean vipassana meditation, well, I would say that is certainly fine, because interestingly, vipassana, not under that term, but under that practice, is actually something Vedic. It's actually something that's found in traditional Vedic yoga. That is the idea of indeed being aware, of having supreme awareness of all things in a detached manner. That is something that's Vedic. That's not Buddhist. The Buddhists later adopted this. So it certainly is absolutely fine to also have this sort of mindfulness. However, I would certainly say that your primary practice should be mantra meditation. And this is the reason why. Mindfulness in a vacuum, that is simply having awareness in a vacuum, doesn't really lead to a via positiva, it doesn't attainment. Rather, it leaves you kind of neutral. At peace, yes. Some contentment, yes. But it doesn't give you a positive attainment. The way that we have a positive attainment is indeed by surrendering ourselves to that highest of all positive beings, to that highest positive reality, and that is God, that is Nārāyaṇāya. And the way that we do that is indeed through mantra meditation. So I would definitely ask that you make this mantra meditation your primary practice. Again, it doesn't have to be the only practice at all. Just as an aside, actually, this is just as an aside, and this is for people who know Vedic spirituality, contemporary Vedic spirituality very well. Unfortunately, with movements and organizations, whether it's ISKCON, whether it's the Transcendental Meditation movement, all the modern movements, what we see is that unfortunately, they have their one practice, and they have grabbed onto that one practice fanatically, and that is the only thing that they'll do, not understanding that the nature of the yogic system is that indeed there are many allied and harmonious practices that are not contradictory in any way. So in order to practice the full yoga system, which is what we teach, indeed, several weeks back we put out a video called Restoring the Complete Vedic System, where I gave a talk about this. We are in our practice to leave actually nothing out. As long as it is Vedic, as long as it is something Vedic that is also leading to the highest goal. So thus, this is also something that I have to emphasize to people, that unlike these other neo-Vedic organizations and movements, we're not fanatics. Indeed, our primary practice is Aum Namo Narayanaya, but it's not our only practice. We, again, recite all of the mantras, all the sacred mantras. We do puja. We do many different yogic techniques. It's a matter, however, of priority. Our goal is to know God, and thus we meditate on the mantra Aum Namo Narayanaya primarily, but not exclusively. Again, there are many authentic mantras that are revealed in the Vedic scriptures. So with that, I will go on. At this point, please give me a few moments, because I see there are so many questions. I'm going to just take a few moments and look through as many of these as I can. I'm going to answer this question because it's an important one. Sometimes it's important to answer overtly and strictly philosophical questions, but it's often just as important to answer questions like this that is, Namaste Sri Acharyaji, thank you kindly for your overwhelming kindness and generosity. I am wondering what one can do or say to Krishna to eradicate the feeling of shame and guilt. This is something that many people suffer from. And first of all, let me tell you that is the first thing to understand, is that you're not the only person who feels this. This is the nature of being a finite being. I need to emphasize why I always emphasize, and for those individuals whom in my audience still cannot get this, that's very unfortunate, but this is why I emphasize. We are not God. If we were God, then we would be beyond perfect, actually. God is not merely perfect. God is beyond perfect. But at the very bare minimum, we certainly would be perfect, but we understand that we're not. Again, those of us who have humility, those of us who are real people, those of us who are not lying to ourselves, including in the name of spirituality, we understand that we're not perfect. We understand that we make mistakes. We understand that every person has done good things, bad things. We indeed have done things that we're ashamed of, people have about, etc. And the truth of the matter is, in the very beginning of one's spiritual life, to look at one's life, to look at indeed all the nasty, bad, negative, unfortunate things that you have done, and to feel a little bit of guilt, a little bit of shame, well, that's normal. Actually, there's actually nothing wrong with that at the very beginning. However, indeed, a person now having looked at this, having repented, that is, having come to the conclusion that, yes, I did all these terrible things in the past, I realize that now, I don't want to do these again. At that point, yes, it is indeed necessary to move beyond merely shame and guilt, and to then begin to understand things in a very philosophical way. Again, it begins with this, with understanding that you're not alone. People are indeed imperfect. Indeed, that's why we're here. That's why most beings are in the material world, is because most beings are imperfect. So that's the first thing, is to understand that. The other thing is to also understand that within the context of eternality and within the context of the transcendent, anything negative that we have done in this world pales into insignificance. You see, think of any, again, negative thing that you did. For how long did you do this? Was it a one-time thing and it lasted for a few minutes? Was it something that lasted for a few years? However long, it had a finite duration to it. Within the context of infinity, it's not even the blink of an eye. Within the context of infinity, it's practically non-existent. So understanding this, number one, but also understanding, because you ask here very specifically, what do you say to Krishna? Understand also what is indeed the nature of Krishna. That is, what is the nature of God. That God has, I'm going to state this in very pedestrian terms because it's very easy to understand. God has seen it all. That's putting it lightly, as an omniscient being, isn't it? God has seen it all. Whatever evil thing you have done, whatever negative, bad thing you have done, God has seen it already in unlimited others. So don't be afraid that God is now going to judge you harshly. And that somehow, because of some negative thing that you've done, now you are unsalvageable. Now you're someone who's beyond repentance. You're someone who cannot be saved, who cannot have liberation. No, on the contrary. God has seen it already. God already knows. And more, again, is love. The nature of God is that God is love. Understanding that and understanding the totality of that love, understanding the depth of that love that God has for us. God has already forgiven us. Indeed, there's not even a matter of forgiveness. So never have this idea that in approaching God, you have to approach God with shame. With humility, yes. Humility is different. Humility is not shame in any way whatsoever. Humility means simply having respect, simply understanding what am I in the face of the infinite, in the face of the divine. So have humility, but also understand that you never have to be afraid to approach God, to approach Krishna with full devotion, regardless of anything you've done. It does not matter what you've done. It doesn't matter how bad it is. As long as now you understand what was the nature of that action, of that activity, of those thoughts, etc., and you've put them behind you, and now in absolute sincerity and devotion, now you wish to surrender your life, your existence, yourself at the feet of God. Whatever you did in the past, it does not even exist. Let it go. And do not be afraid. On the contrary, do not be afraid of the very person who in the Bhagavad Gita says to you, Ma Shuchaha, do not fear. Simply surrender and do not fear. So I hope that was helpful. With that, with the time we have, let me look at a few other questions. Very good. I'll answer this actually because it is actually I'm going to answer two questions, and then at that point I think I'm going to have to end because of time. The first one is, Sri Acharyaji, do you know what was the reasoning behind the Guru of Ramanuja wanting to keep this Ashtakshara mantra confidential? Yes, definitely. That was indeed the tradition in many, let's say, Vedic schools. And it wasn't with the idea of, let's say, being mantra greedy or anything like that. It wasn't the idea of power, oh, we're going to only keep the mantras to ourselves. No, it was actually with the idea that the mantras needed to be protected. You see, in the Brahminical tradition, and we're talking about especially of the ancient past. So again, this story of Ramanuja happened approximately 900 years ago. So around that era and before, the idea is that the Brahmanas, the priests, the gurus, the acharyas, etc., were the guardians of Vedic culture. That being the case, they did not reveal mantras to just anyone. Rather, very intelligently, they did their best to make sure that an individual was worthy of that mantra, that an individual understood the mantras, that they were initiated in the mantras, thus they could say the mantras with a special empowerment, etc., etc. So thus it was pretty much the norm that in the past mantras were very, very heavily guarded for that reason. Again, it was for good reason. Now, as far as the story with Ramanuja, what Ramanuja was showing was that indeed we are in the Kali Yuga, and this being the case, the conditions are so bad in the Kali Yuga that Ramanuja's guru, having told him about the nature of this mantra, Ramanuja understood, no, this cannot be so heavily guarded anymore. This is a mantra that regardless of who people are, even if they're not 100% qualified just yet, they need access to this because things are so bad in this age that they need help. This was Ramanuja's thinking. So this is why he revealed the mantra, and this is why, again, the mantra is taught very openly now. So I hope that answered that question. And then one last thing. Should I chant Aum Namo Narayanaya 108 times? Absolutely, if you can, that is ideal. Yes, a minimum of 108 mantras would be wonderful. And in order to keep track, this is why we have japa mala. So you'll see on my arm, for example, these are not my primary mantra, my primary japa mala for meditating. I keep those in a bag actually, and they're much bigger than these. But this is what an individual uses in the Vedic tradition. This is, one could say, a rosary. I don't like using that term because that's Catholic, but sometimes that's how people will translate it. But these are beads that are used for meditation. And there are 108 beads, not including the top one. this fancy one here. Not including that, there are 108. So as you're meditating, you have these beads and you keep track. Aum Namo Narayanaya, Aum Namo Narayanaya, Aum Namo Narayanaya. And you see how I go from bead to bead to bead, and that way you keep track. And you know you've done 108. So if you have access to such beads, definitely use them. Otherwise, don't worry about it too much. Beads usually are given to people when they receive initiation, especially. But again, it's not something where, if you get beads and you're not initiated, it's some terrible sinful thing. No, if it helps you, have beads. Have beads if it's helpful. But yes, if you can do 108 mantras, that would be ideal, that being a sacred number. Very nice. Wonderful. So with that, we're going to stop here because it's a little bit past the hour, and we try to limit these weekly satsangas to an hour. Let me thank you again very much for being here. We do this once a week. You can imagine, in addition to this, I do many, 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 many other things. Lectures, consulting with people one-on-one, disciples quite literally all throughout the world in many nations, and I write, etc., etc. But interestingly, this is one of my favorite things to do, is every Monday, when Monday 7 p.m. comes around, actually. I absolutely love this activity of being able to interact with you, with so many of you, so many of who I know, so many of who I don't know, for whom maybe this is their first time even hearing this philosophy. So again, thank you for being here, because this is enlivening for me as well. I love the idea that I am helping people in any small way I can to understand spirituality a little bit better and in as authentic a way as is possible. So thank you again for being here. We will again meet next Monday at 7 p.m. Every single Monday at 7 p.m. is when we meet. Please be here again. If you have not yet done so, I ask you to please take a moment and subscribe to this channel. It helps us in so many ways. We want this channel to grow, which it is growing actually by leaps and bounds now. We would like to reach 100,000 people in time, so subscribe. The other thing is, please visit our website, dharmacentral.com. When you go there, you will see our books that are available. You will see a mantra meditation CD, a beautifully produced CD with music, where you will hear me reciting various mantras, including the Aum Namo Narayanaya mantra. So go to Dharma Central, take a look for that. When you're there, please sign up for our email list. And in that way, once in a while, we'll send out an announcement about various things, if a new book comes out or something important, conference or something like that. So please sign up to our email list. And then finally, what I have to always emphasize, please, if you can, if you are inspired to help this movement, the International Sanatana Dharma Society, please become a member. If you look on the menu, you'll see on the drop-down menu that there's a section about membership. Please consider becoming a monthly tithing member, where you will be helping the International Sanatana Dharma Society to continue to grow. And in that way, you also will feel that you are a part of what we are doing. So with that, again, I thank you for being here. Please try to be here again next week. Same day, same time next week. And with that, I ask you all, please, to take very good care of yourselves, especially in these very interesting, very crazy, very perilous times that we are in now, and that will continue to probably get a little bit worse for the next several months ahead. Please take very good care of yourselves, and I will see you hopefully next week. Namaste. Jaya Shriman Narayana. Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Jaya Shri Guru. Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Dharma Rashtra Jayate. Victory to Sanatana Dharma and victory to the Dharma nation. And with that, I will see you all hopefully next week.